So, today I'm going to be discussing intergenerational causes of child abuse and neglect and preventative strategies. I will be focusing on factors that contribute to child abuse and neglect and what preventative strategies can be put in place in order to help children after they have been abused and or neglected. This information will also help to identify some factors that contribute to child abuse and neglect. So, the problem that I identified is intergenerational problems, which includes the relationship between parents and children, family history of abuse and neglect, and substance abuse addiction. The solution that I found is the Empower Action Model. So, interventions of the Empower Action Model. It's a treatment that builds throughout the lifespan of a child. It can be put in place after a child has experienced adverse childhood experiences. So, children, families, and anyone who serves children and families can be involved in a program that promotes health equity throughout a child's lifespan and will develop their environment to help them reach the best health. Treatment does not just focus on one specific level of a child's life, but instead it develops to help the child at the level that they are at, because adverse childhood experiences affect a child's lifespan. So a treatment that does the same needs to be in place. So this just shows the different levels of the whole model. So levels of influence on health. So, that includes the community that they're living in, the family, and then the child as an individual. Some protective factors that are put in place for the treatment are sharing, creating, supporting, growing, and building. And then race, equity, inclusion is also part of the treatment. So, research related to the problem I identified. The first article is Intergenerational Effects of Childhood Maltreatment, a systematic review of the parenting practices of adult survivors of childhood abuse, neglect, and violence, by Green, Wallace, and Ford. So, in this research article, research results did find that parents who had been victims of abuse themselves as a child were more likely to engage in physically aggressive behaviors and physically abuse their children than parents who were not victims of childhood abuse. It was a really large sample, but it found that mothers who had been physically abused and witnessed intimate partner violence as a child were twice as likely to use physical discipline with their own children than mothers who had experienced only one form of violence. And studies also found that neglectful parents had an association with childhood abuse experiences. So the second article that I found relating to my problem is Understanding the Intergenerational Cycle of Trauma and Violence, Maternal Adverse Childhood Experiences, and Parent-to-Child Aggression Risk. This is by Shin, Nelson Hintz, and Jaskrova. So this figure here is showing results from mothers who participated in the study. They answered a questionnaire about their exposure to ACEs before they reached the age of 18. They answered the questions like 1 as yes and then 0 as no, like they haven't experienced any. Those results were then placed into 3 different classes here. That just shows it obviously broken down in numbers from the whole sample and then the percentages. So class 1 and class 2 were actually pretty similar in the results that they found, but class 3 was found to be more likely to have a parent-to-child aggression risk, high levels of inappropriate expectations, the mother having inappropriate expectations for the children, high levels of a lack of empathy, and a high belief in corporal punishment. So mothers who had different levels of exposure to ACEs had different parenting styles as well. And mothers that had a high level and multiple ACEs were more likely to parent aggressively, have lower levels of empathy than mothers who had low levels of ACEs. And none of these results were related to postpartum depression symptoms. Mothers who had exposure to chronic stress did not have a healthy way to regulate the stress, and instead they turned towards more aggressive behavior. And then the research article that I found for a solution was the Empower Action Model. It's a framework preventing adverse childhood experiences by promoting health, equity, and well-being across the lifespan. By Sirvastav, Strompoulos, Mosley, and Daniels. The Empower Action Model was created as a framework to build resilience after a child has experienced ACEs. The Empower Action Model focuses on steps that are put in place for an individual to follow throughout their life, not just at a certain age. And because ACEs stay with someone through their life, so there needs to be a treatment that is the same and that's necessary. You need a treatment that is going to develop with you, and the Empower Action Model does this. This form of treatment program can be helpful for children, families, those who serve families and children, and it can be used in diverse settings and populations. And then these were my references from my articles.